TSN's John Lu with us on Winnipeg Sports Talk. I want to talk about your first year back, John. But just as far as covering the Winnipeg Jets, coming from Montreal where you didn't see the Jets very often, is there a player or two that stood out to you on the ice that maybe has surprised you? And is there a player or two that you've really enjoyed talking to off the ice during the daily conversations around the rink?
Well, I'll start with your second question, Andrew. And one player who I didn't know much about, and I don't think I'd met him before I moved back here, is Brendan Dillon. But he's turned out to be one of my favorite interviews because he's just very thoughtful, very honest, and very forthright, and somebody that you can count on, whether it's an intermission interview or a guy that's when the club goes through tough patches. Generally, we rely on veterans to kind of be spokesmen for the team. So Dylan is one of them. I knew that Adam Lowry was of that nature too, but to actually interact with them again, in intermissions or in odd practice days or post game or whatever, the same role, the same type of energy. And so, yeah, very appreciative of guys like them that I really didn't know anything about or much of. As far as on ice is concerned, players that I've really come to appreciate from being able to watch them from day in, day out, and knew of them but didn't get the opportunity to see them very often. First and foremost, Josh Morrissey. I always knew that he was a very complete defenseman, especially from an offensive standpoint. I didn't know much about his reputation as a defender per se, but he strikes me as very much like a Nicholas Lidstrom type of defenseman, not big and physical, but so smart with good stick, fantastic skater that his ability, just how good he is on his feet allows him to be able to defend at a superior level. And then the offense, it's like, wow, I mean, just the type of campaign that he strung together, it speaks for itself. The other one is Pierre-Luc Dubois. That's before his nagging injury issues started to catch up to him at the beginning of the calendar year. Watching him every game, and yeah, I mean, he was pretty much on a point until his injury issues started to catch up with him. He was on a point per game pace for the first time in his career. So the numbers were certainly there, but just to see how he was doing it, like just how much of a bull he is in the offensive zone, like how he can protect the puck, create space for his line mates, how he agitates opponents just because he's so ridiculously hard to play against when he's on his game. I really developed an appreciation for his abilities because, and again, you really got to hope that there is a realistic chance that the club can retain him. And it seems like from the club's perspective, they believe that they have a chance to do so. And obviously, there are moving parts at play that we're not privy to that are going to affect whether or not that comes to fruition. But again, like we're talking off season, and we'll probably have that conversation hopefully later rather than sooner, because it means they've gone deep in the playoffs, right? Or at least a reasonable length. But yeah, I think that job one for them this off season is to find a way to hold on to Pierre-Luc Dubois.
John, now that was, the hockey question about coming back. I have to ask you, just overall, we're getting towards the end of the regular season. How has the year coming home, working for TSN here in Winnipeg, and how's it been for you overall?
Well, first and foremost, I'd like to say how grateful I am that January and February weren't a typical Winnipeg winter, especially January. I couldn't believe how warm it was. Although my wife doesn't believe me.
That's me. It gets worse.
Adjustment for her, and I really give her a lot of credit for taking this leap with me. I mean, I knew what I was getting into. I grew up here, and I love my hometown. And so for her to move to a place where she doesn't like the cold, it's been tough at times. And the fact that March we didn't have a single day in the plus side of the temperature, that was tough to take. I didn't enjoy that. But aside from that, just being back in this community where the quality of life is so different from Montreal and Toronto, where my drive from home to Canada Life Center. There's too many too many centers with corporate names attached to them. The Canada Life Center is like 10 kilometers, 10, 11 kilometers. And I live right by, my wife and I live right by the U of M. And so I'll never have to drive to a Bombers practice or game. So a lot of that, those little elements of quality of life, and I haven't even mentioned the fact that I'm amongst family and friends, close friends that I grew up with, that I worked with, that I went to school with. There's just so many positives, so many pluses to being back home. That's in addition to the fact that it was a promotion for me moving from Montreal to Winnipeg to take on the duties as host, because I've never hosted before in my career. I wanted to for many years, but there was no opportunity for me to do that in Montreal. So first and foremost, from a career standpoint, it's been a fantastic move. And I'll take this opportunity to thank your listeners, fans who watch TSN broadcasts and have put up with my growing pains in my rookie season, because hosting is a very different animal from just doing the occasional live hit or rank or sideline interview. So it's been a fantastic and very fun challenge. I've loved that, but it's the fact that I get to do that in my hometown is hard to express how wonderful an opportunity it is.
Well, listen, I think as Jet fans, we're pretty appreciative. I mean, you pretty big shoes to fill with Dennis Bayak and Sarah Orlesky. You had such great connections with the fans, and to have you and Dan Robertson come in and not miss a beat, couldn't have not turned out much better. Just about the move, was this a long time coming for you, John, or did it come up, an opportunity, and thought, oh, this will be it, or had you always thought that maybe you'd like to get back to Winnipeg at some point while you're still working at TSN?
Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest with you, Andrew, I thought Sarah was going to retire in the post here, because she's quite a lot younger than I am. And so I had given up on the idea of moving back to my hometown to work for TSN. And so this was not a long time coming. That basically this was just last August when the Jets had hired Sarah. And I'll never forget the day I just got home from a round of golf, and my brother texted me and asked me, did you hear the news about Sarah? My brother, by the way, lives in the southeast end of town, not far from where I live. But I didn't text him back. I just went on a Twitter to find out and saw that Sarah had accepted a job with the Jets. And so I was like, oh, wow, this is opportunity knocking. It's my one and only chance. And so the first thing I did was text my wife, and to make a long story short, we have a home in Atlantic, Canada. She spends the summers there, has been spending the summers there, running a bed and breakfast out of her home for the last 3 summers. And so she was out east at the time. And so I texted her to ask her, how would you feel about us potentially moving to Winnipeg for me to take this job with the TSN there? And she said, yeah, absolutely, go for it. And so then I texted my boss, and he texted me back a short while later. So it's funny, I was going to call you about that. And because he knows I'm from Winnipeg, and wondered that would I be interested in moving back to my hometown, even though I'd have been away for such a long time. And so, yeah, that touched off a process of about 1 month, where toward the end of it, I interviewed for the job here. And then a week later, I was awarded the job. And so, yeah, things moved pretty fast. That basically at the end of September, I did a few days of Canadians training camp. I did the first regional preseason game, which was my last broadcast in Montreal. And then the next day, I started the 2 solid days of driving from Quebec to Winnipeg, and here I am.